In 2005, my fifth grade English teacher read our class a sample chapter from The Lightning Thief, the first book in author Rick Riordan's young adult fantasy series Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I was immediately hooked, got a copy of the book as soon as I could, flew through the next one. It was my favorite book for a long time as a kid and when I was in middle school. I took Latin in middle school and high school because of this book and because of the fascination with Greek mythology that it gave me. The memes you've seen about the kids that read Percy Jackson in their history class doing the, anime push up the glasses thing, that was me. I love this book so much. It's so fantastic, and I will obviously get into that. But when the movie came out in 2010, I was a little older and I was excited. I was cautiously optimistic, but I heard that it wasn't great, kind of decided to just let it go. And at the time I was in that phase that, a lot of people, especially teenagers, go through of like, oh, the book is always better or whatever. So it was pretty easy for me to just let that one go and move on with my life and forget about the movie for a long time. Around the time that I started planning for this series and for this YouTube channel, it was announced that Disney was going to be making a Disney Plus series out of the books. Rick Riordan is on board and seems in large part enthusiastic, and like he feels like the series can be done justice on screen finally. That made me optimistic, and it made me want to go back and reread the books again, and I have to confess, finish them, because the fifth book came out when I was in high school and I had kind of moved on to other interests at that point, and I am embarrassed to say I never finished the series, and I'm really excited to get to the fifth and final book now because, again, it's fantastic. But because of that, with all the optimism around the upcoming early production series, I felt like I had to go back and watch the movie. So I reread the book and I watched the movie and...
Am I recovered? You're not in a wheelchair. You have
a real horse's ass.
God, it's so bad. It just, I think almost everything wrong with the movie can really be summed up with a lack of attention to detail and a lack of forethought in the way that a lot of things are constructed, even down to a micro level. But we're going to get to that. And it's a shame because I feel like it could have been one of those young adult multimedia phenomenons on the level of the Hunger Games or not quite Harry Potter. Nothing is Harry Potter, but it could have been up there. And it seems like a missed opportunity, and I hope with the new series it can garner some of the attention and recognition it deserves, because this book is fantastic. So why is the book so good? What went so horribly wrong with the movie, and what can Disney hopefully do better with their attempt to finally bring Percy Jackson onto the screen properly? My name is Charlie, and this is Page to Screen. There are a lot of layers of just absolute brilliance to The Lightning Thief and to the Percy Jackson novels as a whole. They managed to be one of those rare children's and young adult series that is exciting, high-quality literature that an adult can read and enjoy, a kid can read and enjoy, and everybody who is reading it and enjoying it can learn something along the way. And not just about history and mythology, but also about themselves, about friendship, about feelings, the kinds of things that all books should aspire to do. Every book in the series uses a lot of classical mythological structures and stories to tell what in reality is a very human story about a young kid who wants more out of life. It's something that I think everybody goes through at that age, where they are looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for something else beyond the normal mundane reality of going to school every day. If nothing else, kids are pretty universally looking for belonging. And a lot of kids, like myself, find that at a summer camp. For Percy Jackson, it just so happens that that summer camp is Camp Half-Blood, the camp for the half-human children of the Greek gods. What Riordan does so beautifully is tell a story about summer camp, about friendship, about youth through the lens of Greek mythology. In the Percy Jackson universe, the Greek gods and Greek mythology are real. They've continued to move west across Europe and now into the United States and now live atop the Empire State Building. A lot of modern history is explained in the book through a mythological lens, and it does a really excellent job of describing this modern world where Greek gods and Greek mythical creatures are still alive. It's little details like Dionysus running Camp Half-Blood wearing his Hawaiian shirt and drinking Diet Cokes because he's trying to quit the alcohol. or Hermes having a mail service that monsters and demigods can drop a package into and mail off to Olympus. Things like a summer camp where the dishes are cleaned with lava by harpies and there's a climbing wall where the two walls bash into each other, or Capture the Flag is played with swords. The world feels well thought out, and as the main trio of Percy, Grover, and Annabeth journey across the United States, you get this feeling that this could all be real. In a world where the Greek gods and Greek myths are alive and well, the Lotus Eaters would be at a casino in Vegas. Ares would be a shotgun-wielding biker. Satyrs, wood nymphs, and naiads would be upset about the pollution that humanity has caused. A god of nature like Pan would have run away. And so many of these details and so much of this respect for the mythology is missing from the movie, but we'll get to that. What is more egregious to me is what they did to the characters and to their arcs, and to understand what the movie did wrong there, we have to understand why those arcs worked so well in the book. Percy undergoes what is really a modern Greek tragedy. The classic tale of a demigod hero who fights monsters, travels into the underworld, stands up to the gods, but ultimately, in some ways, still fails. Percy, from the very beginning, is a protector. In the very first chapter, he's talking about his awkward, gangly, disabled friend, Grover, who he feels that he needs to protect from bullies in some ways. Of course, this is somewhat subverted later when we find out that Grover has been protecting Percy, but it's an important part of Percy's character. He feels like he needs to protect his mom in some ways from his disgusting, abusive stepfather, Gabe, but is unable to. He feels he has to protect both of them from the Minotaur, and ultimately fails when his mother is taken away by Hades, although at the time he believes that she has been killed. And this leads Percy to ultimately embark on his quest for the wrong reasons. He's not traveling to Hades to save the world, he is traveling to Hades to save his mom. Even so, it's still a brave, heroic action. Yet in the end, when Percy discovers that Zeus's Master Bolt is actually in his backpack and that he really has brought it to Hades, he's forced to make a choice, knowing that he can only save his friends and save the world by sacrificing his mother. So he does. Yet, in an act of defiance, he also sword battles Ares, the god of war, wins back Hades' Helm of Shadow, and ultimately is able to save his mother. Yet, at the same time, that defiance is set up as a future potential fatal flaw later in the series. Something that is just classic to Greek mythology and to the Greek tragedies. Heroes have these fatal flaws like hubris or like defiance against the gods that ultimately get them killed most of the time. Percy undergoes this great internal struggle and this great character arc, these great moments of development through this very classical Greek lens. And it's such a cool way to develop interest in history and mythology in the children and the young adults that are reading this book and relating to this character. Because really, Percy Jackson is a much more relatable character in our modern context than Odysseus or Agamemnon. And his companions, Grover and Annabeth, are the same way. Annabeth is smart, capable, self-reliant, yet tortured by survivor's guilt and by a feeling of abandonment by her family. Grover struggles not to feel like a failure is all he'll ever be, and that he's destined to fail again at this quest, his last shot at redemption. Yet at the same time, he's very emotionally insightful and is the kind of friend that kids like Percy and Annabeth need to get through the tough times that they inevitably go through as children with such difficult, problematic lives, especially as demigod heroes. And can I just say that I really appreciate Rick Riordan making the female character the strong, independent, highly intelligent one, and making a male character who is responsible for a lot of the emotional labor. It's nice to have a young adult trio where the female lead isn't responsible for the feelings of the two boys the entire time. The movie, on the other hand, very fundamentally subverts these character traits and character arcs of all three of the main trio. And look, sometimes screen adaptations, they need to do something like this. Sometimes drastic changes to a character work out. Maybe they're not better, maybe it's just equally good. But these ones just aren't. Even in a vacuum where these books were never written and somebody just came up with the idea and made it into this movie, it still wouldn't have been good because the characters just aren't well written. So what went so terribly wrong that made these characters come out so poorly on screen? Well, part of it is butterfly effect. Grover's character is changed to be much more confident and much more sure of himself as a protector. And in a vacuum, that's fine. There's a way you could tell this story with a confident, sure of himself Grover who hasn't gone through the tragedy of losing Thalia while trying to lead Thalia, Annabeth, and Luke to camp. Which, by the way, the movie totally tosses out. But the Grover of the movie doesn't really learn anything. He doesn't really have an arc. He just kind of stays the same and helps out semi-bravely for the entire quest. That's about it. For the book version of Grover, there's a lot of emotional payoff to his success because of the failure he's been through in the past. And there's a way to write this confident Grover that isn't necessarily learning from a past failure and still have him learn something and have a character arc through this movie, but they didn't do it. And this causes problems elsewhere too, because again, an important part of Percy's character in the book is that he's a protector, and Grover is someone that he feels a strong need to protect early on. It's what creates their bond of friendship. The movie Grover doesn't really need Percy's protection. And look, maybe that could be fine. Percy still feels this need to protect his mom. He still embarks on his quest to the underworld to save his mom, albeit it's in defiance of Chiron's orders instead of as part of a quest that Chiron has offered him. Oh god, some of this stuff, man, I don't get why they felt the need to change it these ways. But I'm going to try to stay focused here. In the process of the quest, Percy in the movie doesn't really get any of these moments to be a hero in small ways like he did in the book. Things like freeing the animals from the truck where they're clearly being abused in Las Vegas. Things like throwing himself in front of the mother and child at the top of the St. Louis Arch in an attempt to save them from the Chimera. This stuff just isn't there in the movie. He doesn't really get an opportunity to be a hero through anything other than battle and violence until he makes it to the underworld and meets up with Hades and his mother. And god, there's so many problems with the way that they shifted this sequence in this part of the plot. I don't know how abandoning Kronos was supposed to work out for the future movies. Maybe they were just going to make Hades the big bad guy. I don't know. I haven't seen Sea of Monsters yet. I will be watching it this week, though. But in this moment when Percy is confronting Hades and trying to both save his mom and save the world when he realizes that he does have Zeus's Master Bolt, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover don't really do anything. The trio and Sally Jackson are both pinned against the wall, about to be thrown into what is apparently just Christian hell because they've abandoned all of actual Greek mythology in this part of the movie. And then Persephone steps in, takes the bolt away from Hades, knocks him out, and it's just like, oh yeah, he's not going to remember anything. And then she saves everybody. And then basically tells them, like, yeah, you should save yourself and Annabeth and your mom, and then I am going to have weird, awkward, unnecessary sexual tension in a children's young adult movie with Grover. Yeah, and then you can save him later. So it's like, okay, so the heroes didn't actually have to do anything heroic in this moment, and Percy doesn't have to make that choice to sacrifice his mom to save his friends and save the world. He kind of just gets to have everything. There's no arc here. He doesn't learn anything. The only thing he learns is that he has superpowers that he can use to make a water trident and knock Luke out later at the end of the movie. It just makes him come off as this kind of like cocky, smarmy, annoying little 12-year-old instead of the defiant, brave kid who's trying to rebel in positive ways. And god, don't even get me started on what they did to Annabeth. Good lord, that character, it's a tragedy. Basically, her only character traits in the movie are that she's never met her mom and she makes googly eyes at Percy a lot. She doesn't really ever get to do anything to display her intelligence. I don't know if she ever mentioned that she wants to be an architect, like she brings up several times in the book. And she, again, has no character arc. In the book, Annabeth has this whole emotional struggle about the problems she's had with her father and with her immortal family. But in the movie, all she really does is talk about how she's never met her mother and then wave and say, "Hi, Mom," when she goes to Olympus at the end. And it sucks because the book version of Annabeth is a great example of, at least in my mind, a strong female character for young readers to look up to. And the movie just totally took that away from us. And again, it all feels like it comes down to this just lack of forethought and attention to detail in the way the movie was written. It was like all they said was, how do we get from point A to point B as fast as possible with some nice big CGI action scenes? They ignore prophecy, they ignore setting up the way that Greek mythology plays into the real world. The only character whose dialogue has any kind of real foreshadowing is Luke. It's like they just focused in on one trait about Percy, which is that literally he is the son of Poseidon. It has nothing to do with who he is as a person emotionally. It just made that his character. That's it. He's the son of Poseidon. He can throw water tridents. And then they were like, okay, Grover needs to be cool because nobody likes nerds and Book Grover is a nerd. And same with Annabeth. We're throwing out all of that smart girl stuff. She just likes Percy and hasn't met her mom now. It's just, God, it's so frustrating. And you can see that lack of attention to detail in a lot of other parts of the movie too, which is what makes me think this was really the big problem. Like in the Medusa fight in the movie, there's this other woman who's there who is holding on to Annabeth's arm. That woman is turned to stone, and now Annabeth is stuck in position because this statue is holding her arm. And then she's saved when Grover comes up and breaks the statue's hand off at the wrist, and then Annabeth just pulls the hand off of her wrist. It makes no sense. Like, the way this was shot, she could have just taken it off the whole time because it wasn't attached right, and this is so easily fixable. Just have him break the hand instead of breaking the arm. Literally, it's like they were just like, let's throw this all together in the quickest, simplest way possible so we could just get this movie out. And that, God, that is just the worst thing that can happen to an adaptation of a book that you love, is it just gets turned into a soulless money grab. And that's such a cliche term that I know we throw around for all kinds of media these days, but God, that's what this movie feels like. And it's just, it's such a shame because I love this book so much and I want to see a good screen version of it. So what can Disney do better? What can Disney try to do right with their upcoming series? I think making it from the ground up as a television series instead of a movie is a good first step. The Greek epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey are by their nature episodic. Odysseus's journey home has all of these little encounters with monsters and other parts of the mythology that are kind of just separate components of this journey. Maybe they don't all link into the ending, but they're parts of the journey he goes through as a man trying to find his way home. And the Lightning Thief is constructed in the same way. The battle with Medusa, the battle with the Chimera, the little side quest to find Ares' shield, these things, they feel episodic. So constructing it as a TV show allows you to approach all of these properly and really flesh out the backstory of each individual event, of the mythological characters, the monsters, the gods, what have you. A show with 6 to 8 45-minute to an hour episodes also allows for more world building than you can fit into a movie. They can go into the details on how myth has played into our modern life. And you can see this work in other fantasy adaptations. If I have one criticism of the Lord of the Rings movies, it's that every time I watch the extended editions with a friend who hasn't read the books, they tend to have all of these questions about lore and stuff. And that's great that people are interested in it, but some of that stuff just can't totally be answered even over 12 hours of movie. And that's fine. There's a way to construct it where those questions aren't problematic or feel like plot holes. But if you do something like what Game of Thrones did, which as horrifically as it may have ended, in the first 3 to 4 seasons, the world building was really good. The space that they gave themselves by doing these 10 episode seasons of an hour each gave them room to kind of breathe a little extra life into the universe. Life that the books had and that couldn't have really been put there in a movie. And I feel like with the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, they'll be able to do the same thing. But most importantly, they have to flesh out the characters. Even if they change some character traits, even if they change their arcs a little bit, those traits and arcs have to be there. When I was a middle schooler, I loved these books so much because these characters felt like my friends. If nothing else, the Percy Jackson series is about what we will do for our friends. And the main characters are so well written that you feel invested in them the same way that they feel invested in each other. Percy, Grover, and Annabeth face constant danger for each other all the time. And you get this feeling that if you were friends with them, maybe you could be a hero too. And the movie just totally failed to sell you that feeling. So if the show wants to really do these books justice, that's what it has to do. Percy, Grover, and Annabeth have to be real characters. They have to have real flaws. They have to feel like real people, despite the fact that they're two demigods and a satyr. And that's not an easy thing to do, but if they can pull it off, if watching this show feels like hanging out with my friends at camp, I'm going to be watching it every week for as long as it's on. Thank you so much for watching. I had such a good time rereading this book, and even though the movie was bad, I've enjoyed just thinking about this series again, and I'm really looking forward to rereading the rest of the books and to actually finishing it this time, which again, I'm incredibly embarrassed that I never did in high school. I'm working through Sea of Monsters right now, and that'll be coming up hopefully about a week after this video. And from there, I'm considering going through the rest of the series and just talking a little bit about what the upcoming show could do to adapt the books that were never made into movies properly. It's a little off of the format that I originally came up with for this channel, but hey, I've been changing it around, I've been experimenting, and it's my YouTube channel. I can do whatever I want. So if you read this series, whether it was recently or as a kid, and you enjoyed it, and that sounds like something you'd be interested in, leave a comment, let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.